Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, but I would like to welcome all of you. It is an absolutely beautiful early fall evening here in Brunswick, Maine. My name is Sarah Chingos, and I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions here at Bowdoin. Joining me tonight, albeit off screen for right now, is my colleague and friend, Senior Associate Dean of Admissions, Meg Brooks Swift. Meg and I are going to be working in tandem tonight. So while I am speaking, Meg is going to be available behind the scenes to respond to any questions that you might have using the Q&A function. So if something is confusing or doesn't make sense, please don't hesitate to put a question there and one of us will respond. If there are larger themes to the questions as we go through the evening, we may keep those aside and bring them up at the end so we have more time to discuss them. So again, this is a presentation geared for high school, the parents and family members of high school seniors. So to get started, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we plan to cover in the next little bit of time. What we hope to share with you tonight is a really broad overview of the college application process. This is not meant to be Bowdoin specific, but rather an opportunity to really give you a larger framework of understanding as you embark and move along in the process with your student. As the name of the event implies, we hope to meet you where you are in this application process, with the hope that the information that we can share will help form the basis and or build on the ability for your child to navigate their unique application process. I'm going to be introducing a number of terms and phrases, sometimes in fairly rapid fire manner, and I'm going to do my best to make sure to define them and explain them as I go along. Again, I'm also going to be showing you some screenshots from the Common Application that will help you sort of understand and see what it is your student is seeing if they choose to use the Common Application. We also accept other applications, and most schools do, including things like the Coalition or SCORE application, as well as the QuestBridge application. For tonight, I'm going to focus on the Common Application for expediency's sake and not try to address all of them together. We do encourage you again to use the Q&A function to ask questions for clarification at any point along the way. This event is also being recorded, and the link to the recording is going to be sent to you a few days after this program, so you can go back and rewatch segments of it if that would be helpful to you. So I'm going to plan to talk for about 25 minutes or so, and then Meg is going to actually join me on screen, and we're going to use the remainder of the time to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. So again, use that Q&A function. Okay, so first and foremost, take a breath. We want to acknowledge that can be a complicated process and potentially stressful period for both parents, family members, and students. It involves this really hearty stew of sort of emotions and logistics, financial implications, and deadlines. Every student is going to handle it a little bit differently. So there's really no set playbook for how it will go. This is a human, student-centered process. And so unfortunately, tonight we are not able to just hand you a checklist or a roadmap that will automatically lead to one desired outcome. Instead, what we hope to do is arm you with some knowledge about the process so that you can better understand and anticipate the ways that you may be able to support your student through this application process. While right now the end goal may feel like admission to a desired school, the journey together also really does matter. And there may be any number of pathways and potential pivot points that you may come to along and consider along the way. So Meg and I are saying this, and I'm implicating Meg in this as well, but we are talking about this both as admissions professionals, but also as the parents of students. Between the two of us, we have 4 students in college. We know that this is sometimes a messy process, but we also hope that at times it will be fun and affirming. So as of right now, we have close to, we have over 300, close to 350 audience members right now. And each of you are going to have a student who is in a slightly different place in the search and application process. So what I'm going to try to do is start with a very general overview of the application process from now through next May. For those of you who may have joined Meg and I in the springtime when we did the junior parent panels, some of this may seem a little bit familiar. I apologize if there's some redundancy. We're going to try to move through it, but I want to make sure that we are providing a full overview of the experience. So roughly from September through January, it's going to be largely focused on designing a balanced and realistic college list. and then crafting the materials necessary to submit application components by the appropriate deadline dates. This is also going to include submitting required financial aid information as well. And then as we move through, many college admissions decisions will come out starting between February and April. And generally, students may need to make a college decision by May 1st. So May through August then becomes any movement on the wait list that may happen, as well as transitions to preparations for matriculation for your student. So again, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to move forward. For those of you, again, who joined us before, I apologize. I'm going to try to move through some of this fairly quickly. But if your student is at the beginning stages of the process, the first step really is to make sure, and the most important piece is to make sure that you, that student is developing a list of schools where they might be able to thrive. So to identify these schools, your student may need to spend a little bit of time sort of looking inward and thinking about broadly about what they want out of their college education. As a student, they might think about what's important to them now and what they think might be important to them going forward. They might think about what they really like in their high school experience or in their high school community and what parts of that they hope to find in college, or what parts they hope to grow and change and experience something different. What is it that they're looking forward to? Some of your students may have really, really specific ideas about how to respond to some of these questions. And many of them may only have vague ideas, and you might actually just get a whole bunch of shoulder shrugs. That's okay. Regardless, both the specific and the vague will most likely change and evolve over the course of the next few months. So be open to it. As I said before, this is very much a journey. The important part is that your student is asking these questions in order to establish a baseline from which to launch. So the first step, making a list. There are a number of resources that are designed specifically to help you approach this task, so it's not so huge. There are online resources such as the College Board, the FISC Guide, Naviance, and more that provide you, your student with a series of questions that might help them identify schools that might be appealing based on a specific interest or a general interest. We might also encourage them to seek out the counsel of people that they trust, trusted adults, whether it's guidance counselors, family or community members, as well as older students or friends who may have recently completed this process. Each person that they interact with is going to know your student in a different context and will be able to offer some kind of perspective that may help guide and inform the formation of this college list. If it's helpful to kind of think about some of the additional questions that you might ask your student in order to help them hone in on this college list, think about, for example, like what is important to them academically? How do the academic offerings, whether it is a particular program, a particular major, the approaches to learning, the research opportunities available, the learning style, and so on, how do those align with your students' interests now? How about how they think they might align with them for their long-term either career or research goals? Is geography important? If so, is the geography related to location? Like they know that they want to be in the Northeast or the Southwest or international? Or is it more about the type of community? They know that they want to be in an urban setting or a rural setting, or maybe something in between in a suburban setting. What about the size of the institution? Does that matter? Do they want to be at a massive school, or would they prefer something that's a little bit smaller and more comfortable? Does weather matter to them? What about distance from home? How important is that? When you think about questions about culture and campus culture and residential life, student life, does it matter to your student if there are specific opportunities in athletics or in the arts or in service? What about other ways that they might engage with their peers outside of the classroom? Do they want to commute to school, or would they prefer to be in a residential community? And then lastly, how does the school offer financial aid or scholarships that might work with the family's needs and financial picture? So again, keep in mind, all of these questions may have many different answers over the course of the next year or so. They may change, that's okay. This is all part of it. It's mostly just to have a chance to start to ask the questions. So I mentioned here that there are a number of different resources that are possible. I have grabbed a whole bunch of screenshots from the Common App over the course. I actually did these all today, so I'm hoping they're okay through the Common application. But they may choose to utilize your student may choose to utilize the college search tool that's built right into the system. And again, you can take a look here on the Common App. These are all screenshots right from an application. This is going to allow them to do a little bit of research on schools to understand the application requirements and actually go ahead and add schools to their list, all from one source. Again, it's not the only source, it is just one of many. So once you've had a chance to identify some of your students' priorities, it's important then to really address and think about selectivity. When we talk about selectivity, what that refers to is essentially to the admission or the acceptance rate of students to a particular college or university. Your students should be seeking to build a list that's going to include a balance of different selectivity rates and admissions pathways. Their list ideally is going to include some schools where they are very likely to be accepted or even possibly guaranteed acceptance, depending on a specific state program, for example. Maybe some schools that are in the middle ground where it could go either way, and then a few schools that may be a real stretch for the student. It's important to note that when we talk about selectivity, it actually doesn't indicate anything in particular about a particular institution. Just that it receives more applications from students than it's actually able to admit or enroll in its class. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about selectivity. Most colleges and universities, as you start to research in the United States, admit most applicants. It is only actually a very small number of highly selective schools that tend to grab the headlines due to their very low admission rates. There are thousands of colleges and universities across the country. And so I think it's important to note here that we really encourage you to sort of talk about the college search process as the fact that there is just not one perfect school for your child. While your students list may include a variety of selectivity levels, they should hopefully all be schools where your student's actually going to be really happy and is going to thrive in their college experience. So, and I also just do want to emphasize that when we talk about highly selective colleges, we are also want you to understand that they are highly selective and highly unlikely for almost any applicant. And so when you talk about these highly selective colleges, this goes back to the importance of building a balanced list, which is also a reminder to us as family members and as parents that college admissions decisions are not a reflection of an applicant's worth or a prize to be won. This is not a competitive process. Admissions offices are working to construct a class with a variety of different needs and backgrounds and experiences. Their admissions decisions may reflect what that individual college is seeking in a specific context in a specific year. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this. Is sort of similar to the months ahead slide that I showed you earlier, but this slide really provides sort of a general timeline of various application rounds and cycles. So as you can see with the September, so starting now or very soon, schools that may have a rolling admissions deadline, meaning that they admit students actually throughout, they consider applications, read application, and make admissions decisions throughout the year. They may have deadlines and may also actually begin to issue some admissions decisions. Starting around November, we approach the early applications deadlines for a student who may choose to apply either early decision or early action. So early decision is a binding decision when we talk about this, which means that if your student decides to apply early decision to a particular college, they intend to matriculate or enroll in that school if they are admitted. So early decision is binding. Early action, on the other hand, is a non-binding admissions decision, which means that the student may still choose to apply to other schools if they would like to. It is a non-binding decision. It's sort of what we call like an admissions decision in your back pocket. It's great to have. You may decide that that's actually really, really where you want to be and you're done, or it may be that you decide to apply to some other schools. It's up to you. January and February are typically going to see regular decision deadlines, and schools generally are going to begin to release admission decisions in March and April. So as I mentioned before, May 1st is generally when most colleges and universities are going to require your student to confirm their enrollment at a school for the following year. This is also typically the time that schools may move on their wait list, if they do at all. Waitlist decisions may continue to roll out over the course of May and June, and sometimes into the summer even further, depending on the school and its enrollment needs and how the class is being formed. So these are hugely general timelines. I apologize. It's hard to get really specific when we're talking about so many colleges and universities. And some schools or specific programs may even have deadlines that are earlier or later. It's really important that your student is doing their homework and has some way, whether it is through the Common App, whether it's a spreadsheet, a notebook, a calendar, whatever it might be, to capture all of the deadlines that are going to be necessary at the schools to which they choose to apply. So once your student has a balanced list of schools and they may know the application deadlines and the other details, it's time to kind of dig into the application itself. Again, they should be doing their research for each school, but here's a general overview of what an application might include. There are a few systems for compiling information and submitting applications. Namely, we talk about the Common Application. Again, we're going to show examples from that today, but there's also the Coalition or SCORE application, QuestBridge applications, and there may be other institutional or systemic application programs, such as like the University of California system that has a universal application system. For each of these systems, though, your student can expect to be asked to complete some basic information, including like basic biographical and demographic information on how they spend their time outside of the classroom. They will generally be asked to submit some writing and information from others that may come outside of this. And that would include like things like your transcript, the school profile, and the letters of recommendation. So again, I thought it might be helpful to actually show you what it is that your student may see as they start to fill in various parts of an application. So for this program, I'm going to focus solely on the Common Application, but you can safely assume that other applications are roughly similar to this. So when your student first logs in, I want to point out the dashboard and sort of the top pieces of it. They'll see some basic informational dashboard, a tab that will list the colleges and universities that they have selected and they would be able to add into their list that they may choose to apply to. The application itself, which is the tab that I highlighted here, a college search tab that I referenced earlier for getting school-specific information, and a tab with detailed information about financial aid and scholarship opportunities. Once you're actually inside the application tab, the Common App tab, your student will see the various components that I mentioned before. You can see them along the side here. Even if your student has not finalized their college list and doesn't have their personal essay completed or anything else, they can actually still begin to filling out some of the parts of this application, their basic biographical information, etc. So the profile and the family sections are going to ask for some basic biographical information about the student, their name, their contact information, if the student has siblings, etc. Once we get into the education section, that is actually collects information about your student's current or most recent school, the names of the courses that they are taking or may have most recently taken. It asks if there are honors that they've received. It asks if there are particular future plans that they're interested in, either academic areas of study or other like potential majors or things there. So you can see sort of the listing, what's possible there. Then we get to the activities section. The activities section provides space for your student to really tell us a little bit about how they spend their time outside of the classroom. I put this big red arrow here to point to the myriad options that students can consider when thinking about how they list out their activities. This is not at all limited to school clubs, sports, and arts, but it also includes things like if your student spends a lot of time helping out with family responsibilities, if they participate in service work or community engagement, volunteer work, if they have had jobs or internships, and other experiences that may be deemed really important and meaningful to your student. You can help encourage your students to really kind of think expansively in this space and help us understand how they engage outside of the classroom in all ways, including both formal and informal leadership. So I also would then put a star next to the little need help sidebar, which explains all of this student. Everything I'm saying to you right now is actually explained in very similar wording or very similar format in the need help section. So your student can also refer to that as they move through filling out this part of the application. Again, they can start filling out this information anytime, even if they are a long way away right now from hitting a submit button. So regardless of which application you intend to use, your student intends to use, they will be asked to submit some sort of piece of writing, most likely. If they're using the Common Application, it's going to list the colleges to which they intend to apply, and then what required and optional components are needed for each school's application. Just as a quick side note, Meg and I were talking earlier, and we want to note, like, this is really different than those of us who completed college applications either in handwriting or on a typewriter in the late 80s, early 90s. So this is all very, very different. It's really incredible and actually just amazing to watch how efficient it can be now. So sorry for the sidebar, but different components of the school's application, and it will basically walk you through exactly what is required and what is optional within it. Your student's going to be asked which essay prompt they may have chosen to complete or are asked to complete, and they will be given the opportunity to either write it directly into the application, or they can write it, for example, on a Google Doc and cut and paste it into their response. Time's not going to allow us to go into more depth right now on all of these amazing topics and everything else, but fear not, we are offering upcoming virtual sessions on both application writing as well as optional supplemental materials for your students. So please feel free to let your students know that information will be coming to an inbox near them very, very soon. We'll go into where we can go into more depth on all of this writing. So one component that you will definitely want to consider and think about, your student will want to consider and think about, is testing and whether or not they're going to submit test scores as part of the application process. So when we're talking about testing, we're generally referring to standardized testing such as the SAT, the ACT, or AP test scores. Sometimes also international baccalaureate predicted scores or other scores, generally for international applicants. AP score test scores refers to a 1 to 5 scale that is given for students who take the AP exam. So this is not a course grade, but a 1 to 5 scale. For the most part, colleges currently fall into one of 3 categories when it comes to testing, and your student will be able to find testing information on every one of the school's admission websites. Some schools are test required, which means that standardized testing is a required component of a completed application. So many of the schools that went test optional during the pandemic are now returning to required testing. So make sure that you are checking this year's application standards and information as you decide and whether or not to submit testing. Now, a school that is test optional means that it is up to the discretion of the applicant to decide if they plan to submit test scores to that particular school. If your student is applying to multiple test optional test schools, they may also be able to decide to submit scores to some schools, but not to others. It is a school-specific decision that your student will be able to make. And some schools, such as the University of California system, are actually what we call test-free or test-blind, meaning that they actually don't allow any applicant to submit testing scores. So it's important for your student to both know and understand the approach of each of these schools regarding test score submission. And it's totally fine for you to reach out to an admissions office to better understand their philosophy regarding testing. So Bowdoin, for example, is test optional, but we may consider testing differently from other test optional schools. And so you want to make sure that your student does their research to understand sort of the testing philosophy as they make decisions about this particular part of the application. And again, here on the Common App, you can see whether or not they have the choice of whether or not they intend to submit scores. And again, it could be school specific, and so it will walk them through in the testing section of the Common App. So speaking of additional materials, in addition to the generally required application components that I mentioned above, many schools will also provide additional ways that will help admissions officers really get to know an applicant and their interest in a particular school. Some schools will invite students to interview either as a required component or an optional part of the application. There are many different formats and approaches to interviewing. Some schools may have interviews that are conducted by admissions staff, others by alumni, some by senior interviewers. They may take place before your student submits their application, or it may be after they submit after an application. They may be in-person interviews, they may be virtual interviews. Really runs the gamut, depending on the school and their application process. Some schools, such as Bowdoin, invite applicants to submit an additional short piece of writing that responds to a school-specific prompt. So that prompt is often a space for your student to really demonstrate the potential fit for that specific school. So a lot of it is sort of along the variation of like, why X school? And that is something that is oftentimes optional, but we really encourage your students to consider thinking about choosing to submit those supplemental essays. Some schools will invite submission of things like art supplements or portfolios or research paper, and some may also provide a video prompt, which Bowdoin does as well, that your student can respond to. So while it may feel like at times there are just so many hoops for each of your students to jump through, in reality, the way that we see it is that admissions offices are really seeking opportunities to get to know your student and to best understand what makes them tick and how they might be able to contribute to a specific school community. Okay, again, just a reminder, take a breath. Okay, we're getting close here. You may have already heard, and definitely will hear again, that finding the right college fit means three things. So when you talk about a college, you want to find the right fit academically, the right fit socially, and then you also need to consider the right financial fit. So along with understanding how to assess what a college can offer you academically and socially, it's also really important to consider for a student to consider how the financial pieces are going to factor into your student's search. So these terms can be confusing even to those of us who work with them every day. So for now, I'm mostly just going to introduce them and then encourage you to reach out to student aid offices. And then in future sessions, including one next week, which will be run by our absolute student aid whisperer, LK Gagnon, and I encourage you to sign up for that to get really in depth with the student aid. For now, I'm mostly just going to introduce these terms. So when we talk about and you're looking at student aid, the first thing we talk about is cost of attendance. So cost of attendance is basically the sticker price to attend a school. It may appear overwhelmingly huge for some schools, but make sure that you keep in mind that at some of the most expensive schools, due to their generous financial aid resources that are available, may also be some of the most affordable. We talk about need blind versus need aware admissions. A school that is need blind does not consider a student's financial status or ability to pay in determining admissions outcome. A school that is need aware means that your household's ability to afford a college education may affect the admissions decision or the admissions outcome. So need blind versus need aware. Colleges are open about being need aware versus need blind in their processes. So you should absolutely not hesitate to ask for more information about this at each school that your child may be considering. We talk about need-based aid versus merit-based aid. So when we talk about need-based aid, what we're talking about is financial assistance that is based on a family's demonstrated ability to pay for college expenses. Merit aid is also oftentimes called scholarships and is awarded to students based on some indicator such as academic performance or musical talent or some other criteria. Some colleges or universities have separate scholarships that students may apply to, while some will automatically consider all students eligible for certain scholarships. Again, ask the student aid offices. There are loans and there are grants. So a loan is money that you borrow and expected to repay. This money may be borrowed from either the government, which is a federal loan, or it may come from private sources such as banks. There are government loans which may be subsidized, meaning that the government will help you pay for some of the interest on them, or they may be unsubsidized, which means that you start paying interest as soon as the loan is dispersed. A grant is money that never needs to be paid back. It is given to you freely for your college education. As you start to research these schools, again, you should identify how schools package their loans, they put together loans, and how they use grants and loans in their funding. Now we're going to talk about the CSS profile and the FAFSA. The FAFSA has been grabbing a lot of headlines. So these are actually documents that you and your family may be asked to complete in order to determine financial aid, as well as for determination of things like scholarships, grants, loans, and federal work study. The CSS is produced by the College Board and is used by colleges and universities to award non-federal student aid. The FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is used by institutions to determine both federal and non-federal aid to students. As I'm sure you heard, or you may have heard last year, certainly for anyone who has students already in college, the FAFSA went through a major overhaul last year, and it was pretty much not a good thing last year. They are moving forward with it. The anticipated release date right now for the FAFSA is going to be December 1st. We are fingers crossed going to be meeting that. But it certainly does bring into questions that you should be asking every college. If your student is planning to apply early decision or early action, there may be different ways that they are assessing financial aid. Largely, they're using the CSS profile possibly, or other means to determine financial aid. So again, be sure you are asking the questions. The student aid officers are there to help. And then lastly, I just want to mention the net price calculators or my intuition. So every college or university that receives federal funds is required to have a net price calculator on their website. So if you look at every student aid office, you will be able to find the net price calculator. Sometimes it is called My Intuition. Sometimes it's called net price calculator. Completing this calculator, which is essentially like a few questions, it's not a huge lift, will give you a quick snapshot of what your family may be expected to contribute at that particular school. So it usually just asks a few questions to try to get a ballpark for you. Okay. Couple of quick tips just to keep in mind, general application tips. First and foremost, emails in the admissions world, email still rules the day. Encourage your student. I know students don't look at emails anymore. I know that because my own children. I know that from the students that we work with every day. Encourage your student to get in the habit of checking their email, whatever email address they use for the college admissions process. They need to check it frequently because colleges are still going to communicate about important matters, such as missing materials in an application or updates to a student's decision status. They are going to largely do that via email. So typically other family members do not receive these notices or these communications. And so your student's diligence is going to be really important. And it's a great way to help them continue building skills towards their college, because when they get to college, they're still going to use email as well. Every institution operates differently, so your student should identify the dates, the requirements, and the opportunities for places where they're going to apply. For example, are there priority deadlines? Are there scholarship dates that they need to submit something by? Is there rolling admission? Is there an early action plan? Every school has got a slightly different approach, and it's important that your student really have a good handle on the schools that they plan to anticipate or plan to apply to. Admissions people want to help. That's why we're here tonight, right? Encourage your student to utilize the resources around them, not to hesitate to reach out to college admissions offices for assistance when and if they need help. School counselors, as well as like counseling offices or advising offices at your student's high school, can also be great resources and are likely a first step because they know a lot of answers. We spend a lot of time talking to counselors. And so, but let us know how we can help them. We're here to help for a reason. And then your student can also make use of application fee waivers, depending on the college. Some colleges are going to proactively offer these to your student. Others make them available based on certain criteria, such as financial need, or if a student is first in their family to attend college. So your student should really feel free to use these if and as needed, but don't hesitate to ask about fee waivers. Okay. With all of this information coming at your student and so many things, both big picture and small detail to take into consideration for your family, it's really easy for the college admissions process to take an outsized place in the fabric of your family over the next few months. If you will indulge us for just a second, Meg and I have added this slide actually with a few pieces of advice to consider, coming both again from parents as well as admissions professionals. Um, the search creates an important space for really important conversations and honest conversations with your student about what academic, social, and financial fit means. Is everyone okay considering a school that is a plane ride away, for example? Does your student understand the curricular and extracurricular choices that may or may not be available at a particular school? They may realize that they may think that they absolutely love a school because they love the mascot or they love the location or they love something, but make sure they're looking to see that it also offers them where they think they will be able to thrive. And what does affordability look like for your family? You may find ideally that you're all aligned in your thoughts, or that there are really opportunities to sort of come together, to listen and to learn from each other through this process. Along those lines, I would say also try to schedule times for you and your student to discuss the college process, but also to be really aware of establishing boundaries around where and where not these conversations could take place. I can say that as our children moved through the process, we worked really hard to keep the college search process away from the dinner table so that we were intentionally making time for other important aspects of our lives and not allowing the college search process to seep into all of our family time together. It's important to make that time out. And then lastly, understand that the college search process asks your student to really engage in honest reflection while also putting their voice, their work, and their record on display for others to assess. This may elicit a full range of emotions over the course of the search process. And this is all normal, but we urge you to really create space to meet your student where they are, not to compare them to others or their peers or any other or their siblings, and to really focus on the end goal of supporting your student as they move through this exciting new direction. Okay, so with that, I'm going to invite Meg to join me on screen. I'm going to take a sip of my water. I'm going to stop sharing. And we're going to open it up to, I see a lot of questions coming in.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I was actually starting to type this question in, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it live right now, which is how binding is early decision? And if you apply early decision and the financial package doesn't work, can you be released? So early decision is a binding commitment. However, if a financial award is very different from what you were led to believe through the net price calculator and further conversations, you will be able to back out of that commitment and then reapply to other schools for the regular decision rounds.
There is a question. These are some really great questions. I'm just scrolling through them for the first time, so I apologize if I'm sort of reacting as I go. There was a question that said, my student has a passion for a subject that is not offered at school. He spends as much time as he can doing his own research and learning at home. What is the best way to describe this in the activities section? This is a great question. And what I would say is there is room to think about whether it is called independent research or however it might be described succinctly. So for example, if I am making things up. If someone is a really wonderful ornithologist or amateur bird watcher, and it's not something that's available in school, they might choose to list in their activities section, ornithology or bird watcher or whatever it might be. And then they could go into descriptions about if they have taken courses, if they have done independent research, if they have ever had a chance to meet with other people about it, if there's a club that they do, if they go birding every weekend, to try to think sort of expansively about how to describe and possibly quantify, if there is anything available, the things that they do.
Here's a question of whether you should use a separate email on the Common App just for college applications. And I actually think that that is a terrific idea as long as you make sure that you are regularly checking that email address. You may already have noticed, your student may have already noticed that colleges send a lot of emails. And so sometimes it can be nice to have that part of a different account. It should not impact demonstrated interest. Bowdoin is not a school that tracks demonstrated interest, but we for schools that do track the demonstrated interest, it may be worth asking. But I think having a separate email can be a nice way of just trying to keep college and the rest of your life separate. I will go ahead and answer some. I'm seeing some questions here about our fly-in program called Explore Bowdoin. This is we offer 2 different weekends in the fall. We had a record number of applications this year, and we are just not able to fly all the deserving and qualified students to our campus to experience the 2 days in Brunswick, Maine. And so if your student was denied from Explore Bowdoin, please do not see that as an indication that they are not eligible to apply. It truly is more our space and our resources issue, and we are thrilled that they were interested enough in Bowdoin to apply for Explore Bowdoin, and we hope that they will consider applying in either the early decision or the regular decision round.
Great, thank you. There's a question regarding if a student is applying to Bowdoin or another selective college, should that applicant explain in the additional information section why they weren't able to take AP courses or many AP courses? And then it goes on to ask, specifically if it had to do with either scheduling or enrollment or anything or other particular reason that may have precluded their ability to take the course, even if they were interested in it. And the answer is yes, please help us understand. We look very carefully at school profiles, and we seek to really understand the way that a student has accessed rigor and sought out rigor in their high school course. However, sometimes due to, if it's a rural school, if it's a school that is smaller, it may just not have curricular choices that are available to that student, and they may have very limited scheduling because of that. Any way that your student would like us to help understand that, we encourage you either to add it into the additional information section, or if there's no logical place in the application that it fits, to simply send that admissions office an email. You can either reach out to the territory manager, or they're usually listed on every admissions website, or you can just send, usually it's admissions at, bowdoin.edu or wherever it might be, and explain that, and it will be met up with and tagged into that student's application so that we have as much information as possible. More information is better than less.
So there's a great question here about applying for financial aid and whether that is going to impact your chances of getting in, and questions of hearing different views on this. And I just want to speak a little to the difference of different colleges being need blind or need aware. So Bowdoin is a need blind school. That means, as Sarah mentioned, that when we look at your application, it is with no sense of your family's ability to pay. So we are in an incredibly fortunate situation at Bowdoin. We are able to do that. So you are not going to hurt your chances for admissions by applying for aid at the time that your student is applying for admissions. At schools where there is a need aware, they have a limited financial aid budget, and that may go into the consideration of whether a student is admitted. So I don't want to speak on behalf of need aware schools because I have not worked at one, but that may be the discrepancy that you're hearing from different people. Need blind, it will not matter if you're applying for aid or not, and need aware, it could be a factor.
Just quickly, there was a question about, I did mention a financial aid webinar that's coming up. It is next week. It is on September 16th. And there is a September 16th or 17th. Hold on one second. It is. I'll find out. I think it is on. Meg, do you have the information?
I don't, I'm sorry.
I will look it up and find information. You will be receiving an email about it, and your student will be receiving an email with information on how to register. And I will try to find it. I thought I had it right here, and it's actually not listed. I apologize. So There was a question about, my daughter attends an independent school and receives substantial financial aid. Would this qualify her for a fee waiver? Are there income limits for the fee waiver? Families are welcome to request a fee waiver. It depends on the particular school. For some schools, if you intend to apply for financial aid, that the application fee is automatically waived. For some schools, if you are applying as the first in your family to attend college, the application fee is automatically waived. For some schools, you need to reach out and request a waiver. Every school is slightly different. And so encourage you to look on the application webpage or on the student aid webpage for more specifics, and or reach out to your admissions officer if you aren't sure.
There's a question here about the CSS profile and the FAFSA. The main difference there is the FAFSA is the federal form. CSS profile is used as an institutional form. It is a bit more complex, asks more questions. And so it's also getting at different information that schools that provide more institutional aid can use. So, both of them are going to ask for lots of financial information, but the CSS profile does go into a little bit more depth. Sorry, I'm getting caught up here. There are so many questions. Thank you so much for continuing to put them in here.
There was a question about, you mentioned the name of Bowdoin's financial expert, and they're giving a presentation next week. It's actually a woman named L.K. Gagnon, and their presentation is taking place again. I'm still looking for the information. And we will get that information out to you in email. So it's student aid information session at Bowdoin.
Great. Here is a question about, after the student's application is submitted, should the student's high school counselor reach out to Bowdoin? We have the benefit in our admissions process of having a letter written by the guidance counselor. And so at schools where a guidance counselor load is incredibly large, they have the opportunity to check a box and say they're not able to write on the student's behalf. It is not going to hurt your student. They do have they are required to get 2 additional teacher recommendations. And so I would discourage your student's high school counselor to call or advocate. We hope that everything that they would have shared would come through in that letter from the guidance counselor. I think if there are situations that from the time that the application was submitted until later, if there have been developments, anything new that has come up that is critical to the application itself, that might be a time to have a counselor reach out. But that is also the time that we are the busiest in terms of reading applications all day, every day, and to have more information thrown at us can sometimes be just put us over the edge.
There's a question here about student athletes, and this I think could also be drawn out to a student. I'm going to kind of expand it a little bit to a student who has gone really in depth in one particular activity. So in this particular question, it's related to student athletes and the amount of time that is spent in training, which leaves less time for after school and weekend activities. That could also be said for a particular, whether it's debate or mock trial or in theater or arts or other activities as well. And the question was, how do schools view an activities section that isn't filled to the brim because of another deep commitment? That's a great question. And the answer is, we will look at everything. It is, we understand that sometimes somebody is really, really deeply involved. And we see that as an incredible commitment and an incredible motivation that is, that's born out of a deep passion for something. And so we look at that, we understand that, and we are able to take it into context. We don't need to see, I think there's like 10 spaces for you to fill in the Common App. We don't need to see every single one of those spaces filled. Instead, what we're looking for is the ways the student has meaningfully engaged outside of the classroom, and whatever that might look like.
All these great financial aid questions, and LK will answer them better than either Sarah or I can. But just a clarification here, FAFSA and CSS, you do it for admissions and then do it again for each year. So we do, you have to apply for aid every year. If your family's financial situation is similar year to year, it is likely you will be awarded the same amount, but we do have to collect that information for both when they are applying to come in and then in the subsequent years that they're a student.
There's a question about interviews at Bowdoin. And so for Bowdoin, they are optional, a part of the application. We do offer interviews that are going on starting usually in the summertime before the student is entering their, usually before the fall, before their senior year, and then the fall of their senior year. So they can a student can choose to sign up for an interview. We do offer interviews that are done by our staff as well as our senior interviewers, which are this incredible army of seniors who help out with interviews, and then an even bigger army of alumni who also conduct interviews for us. So interviews are either in person or virtual. Again, it's an optional component. You are not required to do an interview. We do encourage it because it helps us really learn a lot about our applicants, and it also is something that it allows our applicants to ask questions of us and of our students and our alumni. So you can visit the Bowdoin admissions webpage and you click on the visit and it will help you connect in with the options for an interview, but it is not a required component.
There's some great questions here about trying to assess the rigor of a student's class selection. And we are benefited in the review process of a document called the school profile. And this is something that the guidance office sends to us, and it gives us a sense of what is provided at the school. So whether it is a school that offers lots and lots of APs, or maybe it's a school that doesn't have anything outside of an honors level or just a standard level. And so we are not, obviously, when we're looking at the rigor, we are not looking at a student who is not able to take rigor based on what's available at the school in a weaker way. So we are really looking at it all very contextually, and we hope that a student has found ways to take advantage of the rigor that is offered. If they are at a school where there is no rigor, but the school might say that they should try to take a dual enrollment course or a course at their local community college, we hope that they have done a little, but it is not as though we are expecting a certain number of AP classes, for instance, because we know across the country, across the world, not every school is going to offer a huge number of AP courses, if any.
Huge shout out to the person, I won't call out their name, who has told us that this financial aid workshop is on the 18th of September. I'm just afraid to actually click off of it to find out the exact information because I'm afraid I'll disconnect all of this. But it is available on our website as well with the upcoming events. So you can find out more information and register there. There is a question about noticing that Bowdoin offers early decision 1, early decision 2, and regular decision. There's a question about whether or not Bowdoin offers an early action option. And the answer is that we do not. We do have the two early decision rounds. The first is a November 15th deadline, and the second is a January 6th deadline. And then our regular decision deadline is also on January 6th.
Here's a question about Bowdoin's popular majors, and I think this is always a great snapshot of the value of a liberal arts college, because at Bowdoin, some of the top 10 majors include everything from computer science to neuroscience to English to government and legal studies to economics. And so students, I think one of the great thing about Bowdoin students is they come in with such excitement about taking classes across the disciplines, and they're able to do that. And you will find some that do a double major and a minor, and some that, will do a major and a minor because they're so interested in trying to take classes across so many different fields.
There's a question about how would you describe the standard testing philosophy at Bowdoin? The Answer to that is that we are truly test optional. We were the first college or university in the country to go test optional. We did it in 1969. And our predecessors really believed that academic and intellectual potential was manifest in lots of different ways. And it may or may not show up in test scores. And so your test scores don't necessarily indicate whether or not you're going to thrive in a Bowdoin classroom. As a result, we truly are test optional. And if statistics are helpful for you, this year is actually the first year that we have over 50% of our incoming class, our first year class now here on campus, that did not choose to submit test scores. So it's 54% this year.
Sorry, writing a response here. Thank you for all of these people that gave us information that we should know about when the financial aid session is.
Okay, it's going to kill me.
So here's a question about Bowdoin, the range of GPAs, and I think this is an important piece to address. In our holistic application, we are really looking at the multiple sides of a student's application, and we're looking at academics from a variety of ways. We want to see the rigor. We want to see how students have performed in the classroom, but grades and the corresponding GPAs differ so much from school to school that it is really hard for us to have a range. We see students that are on a 4.0 grade point average, a 5.0 out of 10, out of 100. Some that don't even give grades, but don't give numbers or letters in the A to E, but a different format. And so we are really looking more contextually in terms of what is available and how other students in past years may have done at the particular school.
A corollary question to that has come up is saying that the school that my child attends does not weight grades and has a GPA scale that's tough. And so basically no grade inflation. Our counselor tells us that the colleges know the high school. Is this something that we should be concerned about? The answer is that we do read contextually, and your counselor is pretty right. We do know the schools. And it is something that we spend a lot of time and we take very seriously. We're kind of being glib about it right now, but the reality is we spend a lot of time making sure that we understand what rigor looks like at your child's high school, and also understand the way that grades are determined and the way that curriculum is formed and what rigor looks like at your child's school. And so the counselor is correct. We do know the schools. We will spend the time. If it's not a school that we know, we will spend the time to be sure that we have a full understanding of what that student's grades actually look like and their GPA looks like.
I know we're running low on time, but I just wanted to respond to a question here about the arts and how to show that you are interested in participating in the arts or majoring in the arts. At Bowdoin, we do have an arts supplement. This is optional. And so if your student is really engaged in music, in visual arts, in theater or dance, we welcome them to submit a supplement, whether they want to major in those areas or just be part of the extracurricular programming. And if you go to our website and dig through to the application requirements, you will find more specific information about what is required for each of those supplements.
We have, at this point, it is time for us to wrap up, and I apologize for cutting this off. And I apologize for the questions we have not been able to get to. Just for contextual purposes, understanding we have close to 60 questions that are currently unanswered. We have gotten to as many of them as we are able to. If there are pressing questions that you have not been able to have answered tonight, we do encourage you to reach out to the admissions office at admissions@bowdoin.edu. We will make sure that it gets answered. And also encourage you to consider attending some of the upcoming virtual programs that we do have. You'll be receiving an email with a digest once a month with all of the upcoming programs that you can register for. And your student can also help you understand and see what programs are coming up as well. So on behalf of Meg and myself and all of us at Bowdoin, we hope that this information has been helpful to you. We hope it's been a good use of an hour for you. We appreciate your joining us this evening and hope that you have a great evening, day, or rest of your time. Take care.